Hi, and welcome to Lights On, a NeuroMoms Collective podcast, a space for parents and caregivers walking the journey of traumatic brain injury recovery. I'm Amanda, a mom, a caregiver, a wife, and the co host. I've been there through hospital stays, therapy sessions, and the long road for healing. We share real stories, have honest conversations, and hope that comes through walking this road. You are not alone.
And I'm Erin. I am the co-host, mom, and caregiver. And like so many of you, I did not expect to be in this world, but here we are. And we created this podcast, Lights On, because when you are suddenly part of the traumatic brain injury world, it can feel like all of the lights have gone out. We wanted to have a spot where it felt like there was some glimmers of hope and some light out of the darkness. So here we are. We're going to take time today to discuss some interesting things about connecting with our community.
All right, here we go. So today our topic is really looking at what are those community resources and how can we support each other? And one of those things that kind of comes up are what are those emotions that we feel when we all of a sudden are in a position and we think we need help. We cannot do this alone. Erin, what were some of those first thoughts that you had when you realized like I need to ask for help and where am I going to get this help?
I had so much confusion and lack of perspective that I didn't want to ask for help because I was convinced this was a short-term acute crisis. And I was
Mm.
sure that I could get through today and tomorrow, and I can handle this very hard week. And in our case, we're 3 years out and we're still very active. Basically, 2 full years we're in hospital. And so I didn't have any understanding that I was going to need a lot of help. In the beginning, I wasn't able to ask for help, but people who had more experience with this kind of thing than me were inserting themselves saying, girl, you're going to need some help. And this is what I can offer. And as I was finding relief from them, I was able to recognize what I needed for my greater community.
Yeah, that's so true. You have no idea what to expect. Anytime I think you have this acute event that happens, unless you have experience with it or a family member or a friend, you have no idea the longevity of it. I was in that same position, and even understanding who we are and how difficult it is to ask for help. For me, even thinking of the fear of rejection. What if I reach out and seek help, but what if I get rejected and that help isn't going to be there? That was something in the back of my mind, not being able to understand that at the time, but just knowing who I am. I think that often plays a role
Mm.
too.
That makes sense to me. I had a lot of guilt asking for help. I had a lot of shame. Um,
Mhm.
because I was afraid that people would think that I needed help because I wasn't strong enough or because I
Mhm.
wasn't dedicated enough. I was raised in a environment where the way that we could show that something mattered to us was to be all in and take on all the burden and all of the drama and to just bootstrap it. I wasn't raised in a way that I understood that is too much burden for one person, especially when it's something this big. But I had a lot of shame about admitting that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. And it does depend on how you grow up and how people show up in those formative years. What does
Mhm.
your community look like in your family structure? Who is
Mhm.
your community? And I think about that in terms of growing up. Both my parents were in the church. So a big part of our community is our church community. And when I think about the way they showed up for us, it was in a pretty significant way. The other big part of our community, because we come from a very small community, our school system is less than 1,000 students,
Mm.
preschool through 12. So, yes, Erin, very small.
That's tiny.
And the tiny school, and the school that my great aunt went to, that my dad went to, and all of his siblings. So, it's a very family oriented community. Community is literally right where we are, right where the girl's accident happened.
Mhm.
So when something happens in a small area like this, word travels fast.
When word was traveling fast, and I know that you've talked about in previous episodes, one of Mackenzie's coaches showing up and being incredibly helpful. Were you able to ask for help in the beginning, or like me, people sort of knew what kind of help you might need and were making that available, and you just had to figure out how to not reject it? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. People were just showing up and things were just happening because I didn't know how or what to do. I didn't know how to manage it. Best friend from high school, somebody from the community, no
Mhm.
longer lived in the community, but she was really good at helping shuffle things in the lanes that they needed to be in. That was a really good resource for me. She had to orchestrate, okay, they need meals at home. This is what that's going to look like. We're not going to allow visitors. That's what this is going to look like.
Mhm.
Because it was, again, such a whirlwind. And like we've talked about in previous episodes, as caregivers, we're just trying to figure out how to put 2 feet on the floor every day and stand upright and be all in for our child that we're caring for. So I think it's so important to have those people that can come alongside us and help us navigate. She was my glimmer, she was my light.
Mhm.
Thinking about that lighthouse, I knew I could turn to her because she had all of her faculties. Even though she was Mackenzie's godmother, she could remove herself enough emotionally to help guide what needed to happen. So I think those people are so important.
So I'm hearing this from a business perspective, thinking you had a project manager. Like,
Yeah.
a traumatic brain injury or an acquired brain injury or any terrible illness is overwhelming
Hmm.
with so many parts that you need a project manager. And most of the time, it's going to be the next closest person, the parent or the spouse. But when the catastrophe is as big as they were for your child and for my child, and unfortunately for so many people, it is appropriate to allow somebody to help with that who has the skills. And I think how lucky you were to have somebody who could step in that way.
Yeah. And I think because of our relationship, there was not going to be any stepping on toes. She knew what she could and couldn't do. She knew me very well, so there wasn't going to be any overstepping boundaries there. So I think it was a safe relationship. Not just anyone would have been able to walk in that space and say, I really think that you need to put it out there that we can't have any visitors, or I think you need to put a visitor schedule out there. Not just anyone can say that to somebody who's in crisis.
How complicated and tricky is this when you're trying to fight for your child's survival, that you're actually thinking about these things as well? We're saying that tricky thing of sometimes you have to show up and just do something for somebody, but also it's really important that you don't show up when you're not needed, when the time is inappropriate, and insert yourself. Like, that's a really tricky thing. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with the concept of the circles of grief? Is that something that you've spent much time thinking about? In the middle of the crisis, right? In your case was Mackenzie, my case was Dallas. The next circle out was us as the primary caregivers. And then we go to our spouses and our other children, and out and out and out. And people need to realize where they are in that circle of
Hmm.
connection. If they're sending you a Christmas card once a year, that is lovely. If you say hi when you run into them in a restaurant, that is lovely. Those are not the same people that can show up and make you brush your teeth. You need to understand from the outside where you are. And if you're further out and you care and you want to support, there are things that we need you to do. But
Hmm.
if they have not already seen you going through some things in your life, probably they don't need to be right in the room with you. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Those intimate moments where we are losing our mind,
Hmm.
those are really reserved for those people. We do
Hmm.
not need to have it showcased for everybody to witness and see when we are sleep deprived and when we are struggling to make a decision whether we want strawberry jelly on our peanut butter or grape.
That is a real stress when we're that tired. It's really serious. The majority of my support came from I owned a business for 23 years. I owned a wine shop and bar. What up? And I had built this very big community. It was just an amazing group. I think the reason my business was successful for so long is that it was almost like a community center. And I had a weekly newsletter that went out. And Dallas's situation happened during COVID times. Because of COVID times, our regular Friday groups had gone to virtual Thursday wine tastings for years. And they were huge. Like 125 people would be logged in, having happy hour together. It was a blast. So when this happened with Dallas, I knew I had to tell them because they knew me
Mm.
so well. And Dallas had worked in the shop. They all knew him. And I had to tell him. And when I told them, I immediately activated that group. I'm from Portland, Oregon. And His accident happened in the South, but within 5 days we were in Arizona, and we were in Arizona for months. I started getting DoorDash. I didn't even know what DoorDash was. This was a few years ago. I'd never used it. I didn't want to GoFundMe. I didn't want something like that because I felt like that was reserved for people in a bigger financial burden than we were in. I didn't understand that this was going to be a multi-year issue, in which case maybe I would have gone for the GoFundMe, but I didn't do it. But they just started sending me DoorDash and support that way. We had $3,000 in DoorDash, and that was unbelievably helpful. We worked on that for almost 2 years. People also sent, I have a private Instagram and a public Instagram. And on my private Instagram that y'all not getting on, I put the address of the hotel that I was at. And that smaller group of people that are at that inner circle of my life had my address, and people started sending cards. I was asking them to send things for my son, send cards I can put up in his room. He didn't have any clothes. He didn't have anything, right? Because he collapsed and his clothes were cut off of him. He literally had a pair of stinky Converse and one AirPod. Those were his possessions when we got to him. So people were sending clothes for him and stuff, but then people started sending me things. It was really special, not because they were things of such value, but because they were things of such heart.
Yeah.
Did you get treasures and trinkets that just made you feel loved also?
I'm sure I did. I'm
Yeah.
sure there was something along the way, but this far out, I don't remember if I did or not. I know we did get a lot of cards that had some of the sweetest little messages in them, and
Mhm.
those I do still have. We have boxes of those cards that the girls have saved that they got from different classrooms at school. The teachers had the students make cards and send them. Those were things that we put up in the room, posters for both of the girls. So that was really sweet. I think that definitely speaks to where our heart is right now about being able to really see the caregivers. Not that I needed things sent to me. That is not the reason we want to do something more for caregivers, but we recognize the difficulty that our caregivers go through, how challenging it is to be that person day in and day out, trying to keep pouring from empty, finding ways to kind of love on them from a distance or nearby. One of the things that has been laid on Erin and I's heart and minds is to think about doing some support for caregivers. And we want to talk a little bit about what that can look like. Erin, you want to share a little bit about some of our thoughts about our NeuroMom Comfort Care Kits that we're trying to figure out our snazzy little name for?
We do need a snazzy name. We were talking about glimmer kits, and that makes me think of like shiny makeup to go to the Oscars. So, like, we've got to come up with the right thing. And I think that these kits, and in general, like my experience of getting lots of treasures and yours, I was living in a hotel. I was 1,000 miles away from my spouse. I didn't have anything. People were trying to make me feel closer to home by sending things like picture frames and fuzzy blankets. But what we were
Yeah.
thinking about doing for these comfort kits is recognizing that when you land in a neuro ICU or in any ICU, and in the case of neuro, you don't go home the next day. It's going to be a long haul once you're there. You don't have as a caregiver the things that you need. And of course, your entire focus is on the person that you're supporting, the person that's injured. That doesn't change that you literally still have bio needs in your own body. And what are the things that you didn't have and that you desperately could have used? So, Amanda and I, we made this idea of the things that we most critically needed. And anybody listening can't see our cute little packs, but we got these like adorable makeup bags, little lunch pail looking things. And we put notepads with pens, and we put in snacks and Kleenex. Y'all, the Kleenex at a hospital is 1 ply. When you are crying, the kind of crying that we were doing, you need some solid 2 ply. And hair ties and eye masks and toothbrushes. You need a toothbrush and face wash and chapstick and water bottles and like everything. And then, of course, you need a fuzzy blanket that just feels a little more cozy. They're always very generous at the hospitals to give blankets to you. Those are amazing, but they're kind of scratchy and they're institutional. Having something that belongs to you feels really nice when you're feeling so lost. So we wanted to put those together. Are these expensive, Amanda, for us to create?
No, they are not, Erin. We priced out a tier one and a tier two. So a tier one kit has a few of the basics, and that's like $10. But really, we're looking at $20 to put together these kits. And just, again, just to bring a little glimmer,
Mhm.
to a caregiver that is all of a sudden landed in a space that they weren't really sure they'd be in and not even sure how to navigate. Erin, I think the story that you share, and I'm going to put you on the spot to share it, about the nurse who would greet you at 4 a.m. with a
Mhm.
warm blanket that just felt
Mhm.
like a hug. Would you share that story?
When we were at Barrow Neurological Institute in Arizona, visiting hours started at 5. I would get there at 4:45, and I would wait outside the neuro doors for somebody to go in or out, and I'd run in behind them and go into the room a few minutes early. I would stay there till like 10 p.m. And this nurse every morning, he was so lovely. He treated Dallas so well, and he treated me so well. Every morning he would bring me a blanket from the blanket warmer, and he'd wrap it around me from behind me, and he'd put it over me, and he'd rub my shoulders, and he'd say, "Good morning, mama." And he would just every morning see me. I was alone out there at that time, and it was so anchoring, and it was so kind. And the coffee shop didn't open until 6 a.m. And so at 6, he'd come in and say, "Okay, it's 6 o'clock. You can go get your coffee." So,
Aw,
yeah, I mean, that touch and that connection was really important.
what a sweet little glimmer that you had. And
I
so
know.
that's one of the things we want to do, is just to be able to roll that blanket out there as
Mhm.
just a hug from us.
Mhm.
That every time a sweet mama wraps herself up in that blanket, that she can just feel a hug coming from these mamas that have walked through some of those uncertain days.
I just have this dream of when people wind up in the neuro ICU, that the neuro teams just go to a closet and get one of these kits and just hand this to them. "You're going to
Mhm.
need this. We don't have to be there. They don't have to interact with us. You're going to need this." To me, I just think we could change so many lives so quickly and with so little money. So I really hope we're able to get this growing, and we will.
So if you're listening to this and you want to donate, just reach out to us. There's lots of different avenues. We are getting started on this Christmas
Mhm.
2025. We're going to be rolling it out. So our resource today is a support menu, and we will have that linked in the show notes with a list of things you can do to show support to individuals that are dealing with traumatic events. Our quote today is, "We don't heal in isolation, but in community," by S. Kelly Harrell, Gift of a Dream Time from 2024.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Thank you. If this episode connected with you, we would love it if you would share it with your friends, like and subscribe. We can be found on YouTube, our website, Spotify, and we are waiting for that Apple to come right through, but any day now. Thank you so much for being part of our journey, and keep those lights on. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.